that, hello Susan from Stellingshire, the video will be made available, so hopefully we can fix some of that kind of lag and some of that nonsense you get on an online hangout, I guess. So I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to start my waffle, and we'll make our way through it, so bear with me. Can you all see the screen? I can no longer see the chat, so I don't know. Kathleen, if you could just keep an eye on stuff, that would be brilliant, because I can no longer see you either. So thank you, Kathleen. I always like to start things off with a bit of a thank you, and thank you, Festival of Folklore, and Kathleen, for inviting me along. It's a real pleasure to talk about things to do with Michaelmas and Scottish folk practice. And some of you who probably follow my writing will be here, and some of you that don't will be here. So a little bit about me, and these things are always really, really awkward, but I could probably sit here and tell you lots of things about me. Where to begin? What I would like to do before we get into the main thrust of it is just have a wee moment. I was just saying to Kathleen that I would normally do these things in person and you get to see me flailing around a stage, making jokes and all of that kind of stuff. But we're together in a kind of online community for these kind of things. So if you have a hot drink, and forgive me for being a bit of a hippie about this, if you have a hot drink or a drink with you, just put your hands on it, or just kind of look at the screen and just know that at the moment there is another round about 100 of you all doing the same thing and all listening to my voice, which is slightly terrifying, but also really nice because it's us coming together in community around a topic to do with folklore, and particularly Scottish folklore. And that's really important to me, really, really important to me. And it's why I like to talk about things like this, because we all come from diverse backgrounds. We all have diverse experiences. And it's a way of kind of offering hospitality, which is one of the kind of great things about Scotland. And one of the things I'm very proud of about Scotland is the hospitality that it offers people. And also, we all come from diverse backgrounds and diverse beliefs, and some of us might be academics, some of us might be pagans, Christians, Muslims, Jews, whoever you are. We have a kind of diversity, and we need to respect that diversity that we bring to events like this. So I'm just going to raise my cup and say Sláinte and welcome to you all. For those that don't know, I come from folklore from a kind of different background. I'm primarily a psychologist and a social worker, and my interest in Scottish folklore and the things that happen around Scottish folklore, such as customs and traditions, are to do with how it brings people together from diverse backgrounds into community. And it's really important that we kind of acknowledge that a lot of the traditions that I'm about to talk about are kind of waning. And one of the things that they can do, one of the things that they are able to do, is bring us together in community to share stories and food and good times. I guess in the time of COVID, that's like a little bit different. I don't know how it is where you all are, but at the moment in Scotland, we're not allowed anyone in our house, and people are stuck in universities and halls of residence and they can't go anywhere. I laugh nervously because it's quite serious. So yeah, when I look at folklore, I look at it through the eyes of someone that builds communities and networks of people. So I've been studying folklore now for 12 years, and I'm about to embark in a PhD all about kind of ancestral practices and how they relate to the witchcraft trials of the 16th century. But all of this came about, all of the writing came about because of the community that I shared with other people. And research is kind of dull. If you think about it, when we read it, it's a little bit plain and it's not very alive. What brings it alive is sharing it with people like yourselves. So yeah, I think that's enough about me. But as we go through the presentation, realize that I'm not going to be imparting with you with kind of knowledge of things in a kind of religious aspect. I guess you could say that I come at things as a very broad animist with a focus on community. So a lot of the things that I'll be highlighting are about those kind of elements, but take from it what you will, really. So in terms of communities, I'm part of a collective called the Taishe Collective that you can check out in the link on the screen. My writing can be found at the Kayak Siberian. And also we run a community of people who are passionate about folk sites or heritage sites or sacred sites, however you want to kind of term it, called the Woven Land Network. And if that's something that you're interested in, the link is on the page there. But all of them are built around the premise of community and bringing diverse, people together. Anyway, that's enough about me and that awkwardness of things. I also apologize. I have a tendency to go on tangents and go all over the place. And I'll try to keep to task because I realize that we're on a bit of a time limit today. And also listening to somebody on a Zoom call chat about things for 45 minutes can be, tiring at the best. So what we'll be covering today is a kind of very brief look at the Scottish folk calendar, because I don't know where you all come from or the knowledge that you bring. So I want to talk a little bit about the original Scottish folk calendar customs, where they kind of come from and originate from, and why we're going to be focusing on kind of harvest time with Michaelmas. And then we're going to touch briefly on some of the I can't say that word, but some of the melding of things that exist in Scottish folk lore and folk history, and some of the symbology behind some of the main kind of characters in it. And then going to go on a massive tangent, and I'm going to tell you a story about the origin of the seals. It's not too much of a massive tangent, but it's a little bit of one. And then we're going to go into the Michaelmas customs of carrots. There's a lot of carrots. I warn you in advance, there is a lot of carrot chat in this presentation. And yeah, just carrots, we'll get there. We'll talk about the sacrificial lamb and the struan, which is kind of like a bannock. We'll talk about dancing and the cavalcades that happened on Michaelmas. And then Horses in the Sea, which is the kind of title of this chat. And if you've got time at the end, I have a song to share from you from an album that I produced, 3 years ago now, all about selkies, but we'll see how we go with time. But you're lucky it's not me singing, honestly, it would be awful. So Scottish folk festivals, in terms of calendars of events, Scottish folk festivals kind of sit between the idea of summer and winter. And everything in between that kind of fits around that. And then there was lots of merging and lots of kind of blending between the two different times, if you like, a time of production and a time of reflection, basically. And in Scotland, we have 4 major festivals. And I have to forgive me for this really nasty slide. I probably could have done it better on an Etch-a-Sketch, but if you look at the kind of idea is the year was split in 2 by our kind of ancestors or our people. And the kind of the main gates of the year were Beltane, which is down at the bottom, and Samhain, which is at the top, also known as Halloween or All Saints' Day. And then bisecting this, we have the Nassau, which is the Festival of Lugh, and then we have Little Brige, which is the Festival of Brige, or other people kind of call it Imbolc. What we kind of have to think about is it's not an astrological calendar, really. It's a festival calendar. So Linassal is the height of summer to our ancestors, and the start of the harvest time is Linassal. So that would be the Festival of Lugh and all of the things that kind of come with that. And we'll touch on that a little bit. And then as we move around, we get to Michaelmas, the Fiel Michael, and then Samhain, and then following Samhain, we have Martimas. And all of these festivals are harvest festivals in a way. But a lot of people think it's like first harvest, equinox, final harvest, Samhain. But the kind of the writing looks at it very differently. there's a lot of kind of blending between the different festivals. So Lenassol was the start of the harvest and the height of summer. And then Michaelmas is kind of like mid-harvest, and then Samhain was the kind of close of harvest and the start of winter. And then Martinmas was when you killed geese and you poured the blood on your doorsteps and all the rest of it. Lenassol and Samhain were the original, I'm going to do this, Celtic festivals, if you like, or the Scottish festivals. And then when we had religion that entered into things, it kind of stirred the pot, if you like. So due to the kind of contention around these quarter days like Samhain and Beltane, etc., they were moved to less kind of contentious days because there were prohibitions that people couldn't do on these festivals put on them by the Kirk. There was also changes in the dates due to calendar changes, like from the old to the new calendar. And there's still instances in, I think, Shetland, where they celebrate New Year in the old calendar date on the 12th of January rather than the 1st. Also, Scotland is an island. Primarily, we're an island surrounded by water. The amount of different cultures and people that have come to this island is huge, like the Norse, Gaels, Picts, Irish, Normans, Anglo-Saxons, gosh, you name it. So there was also a blending of all of the ideologies and the thoughts of these different cultures had. So I actually think that's a really beautiful thing, that this blending of ideology and thoughts and ideas kind of created what we have today. And I'm also thankful to all of the Christian scholars and the academics who went out and about, like Alexander Carmichael, and recorded a lot of the lore that we have. Without them, it would be really, really lost. But obviously it comes with a problem that these were men, primarily with a lot of money, who were also religious. So a lot of the heathenry in it was kind of brushed under the carpet. For instance, Alexander Carmichael's Gaelic, translations aren't 100% accurate. He mistranslates some things because, well, it kind of suits his agenda a little bit. And also he didn't transcribe it all himself either. Sorry, I'm going on one of those tangents. So yeah, there's a lot of things to unpick in it, but actually these are kind of gold mines of things. And I'm going to be talking a bit about the ideas from the Carmina Gadelica, which is written by Alexander Carmichael, in a wee bit. So in terms of the kind of festivals and the blending of these, we also get the blending of kind of folk belief. I'm going to put a pin in that and kind of clarify. When I mean folk belief, I mean the beliefs of the people, the beliefs of our people, that could be anything. It could be around stories of their principality, like Dumfries and Galloway has its stories, the Scottish Borders has its stories, the Highlands has its stories, and these are very individual to place. But then we have the influx of kind of Christian stories and Christian tales. And what started to happen is these folk stories and folk beliefs, whatever they may be, were pinned around different characters of a religious character. So going back and reflecting on the idea of Lenassol, we had Lugh the long-armed. We'll touch on him in a wee second, which was then kind of shifted onto Michaelmas and Saint Michael, or the Archangel Michael. And amongst all of this as well, we have a character called Manon MacLear, who is son of the sea. And these are all characters from stories that you might know, but they all have similarities in common. And a lot of the blending happened around Archangel Michael relates to Manon MacLear, and it also relates to Lugh. Lugh was also blended a lot with St. Patrick. This is a whole talk for another day. But for instance, Archangel Michael was kind of depicted as a warrior trampling over dragons, and he drove the rebellious hosts from heaven, and he was the conqueror of all evil powers. He was also massively associated with horses and the sea and the weighing of souls. And in the Hebrides, he was called Brian and Michael, God Michael, or the Warrior of Courage. And there's lots of different shrines, if you like, or temples, in inverted commas, that are dedicated to St. Michael around the Hebrides. And it's almost like he became a bit of a Neptune-like figure to the Gaels. And this is Banks's idea. Banks was a folklorist, from the 20th century. So Manon MacLear was also a warrior and an overcomer of evil. He was also related to Saint Michael, or the Archangel Michael, in a way that there's a story that Archangel Michael was intrinsic in creating the Sidhe, or the fairies. And I'm sorry to use the F word, I'll try not to use it, I'll use the proper word, which is the Sidhe, or the good people, or the good neighbors. So when Michael was chasing Lucifer and there was fights and God was like, right, no, stop. And everything stopped at the moment where it was. So rebellious angels that were in the sky became the host of the sky. The sky spirits, if you like, those that were on earth became the earth spirits, and those that were in the sea became the sea spirits, which is the kind of definitions of the different layers of the good neighbors, if you like. Manon MacLear, in the stories, was responsible for dividing the Sidhe mounds amongst the Tuatha De Danann, which is the kind of Celtic pantheon, and I'm going to use bunny ears again. I kind of view them as ancestral figures rather than kind of deity-like figures. But when the Milesians invaded, i.e. us, the humans, and took over the Tuatha De Danann and went into the Sidhe mounds, and then there's kind of correlation to that. And Lugh was the foster son of Manon MacLear. But Lugh was primarily associated with horses and a great fighter, and kind of all of the rest of the things that was all kind of blended in with St. Michael's figure. So you can almost kind of feel as if the stories of Manon MacLear and Lugh kind of got blended into the figure of Michael, or Saint Michael, or the Archangel Michael, and Michaelmas represents some of that stuff. So why I'm talking about that is, when we're talking about some of the kind of traditions and things, I want you to hold on to the idea that all of these different stories hold lots of different threads from lots of different places and lots of different cultures. It isn't just necessarily a Christian story or a heathen story or a heathen custom. It kind of all blends together. I hope that makes sense. I would normally ask you in the audience if it made sense, but I can't see you, so I'm just going to assume that it does. This is a little bit of a tangent, but it relates to a story of Lugh, and it relates to a story of seals. You might be familiar with the story of Lugh. There was a folk tale that was told to John O'Donovan that Lady Gregory kind of elaborated on. And it's a story about Balor of the Evil Eye, and Lugh, and it's very much related in the whole run of the story to how Lugh took the knowledge to harvest, basically. And we're talking about harvest festivals, so it's kind of relevant. So in the story, you might know, Balor went to see a druid. The druid said, hey, your grandson's gonna kill you. So Balor or Balor was like, okay, then I'm going to imprison my daughter in a tower and surround her with 12 women who will make sure that she doesn't know the ways of men and never meets a man, so can never have a grandson. And then there was a king who had a magic cow, and this magic cow Balor wanted because it made so much milk, it was amazing. So he disguised himself as a little redhead boy and stole the cow and took it back to his castle. Then the king was really annoyed. Sorry, I'm paraphrasing massively. The king was really annoyed and was looking for revenge on Balor, who stole his cow. And then he spoke to a fairy woman called Birog, who transported this king's son to the top of the tower, where he seduces Eithne, which is the daughter of Balor. and then she has babies by him. And then Balor gets raging and then throws three of them, or two of them, into a whirlpool, but one of them lands on the shore and is rescued by Birog, which is this fairy woman. And then she takes him to her father and takes him to the Gofnir, which is the smith. So in the story that I want to tell you, which is a story that not many people know about, is it's a very similar story, but it comes from the coast of Ireland and the west coast of Scotland. So in this tale, there was three brothers of the Canes, and there was a smith in Ireland, and he had a cow named Glasglevin, which is this magic cow that appears everywhere. She had as much milk as 20 cows, but there had to be a man watching her from morning to sunset because she was under a spell. So any man who would guard her from morning to sunset would be given a sword for his pay, which I don't know how much a sword costs, but it sounds okay to me. But it took a good man to guard this cow. For every day that she was feeding, she would travel 60 miles, eating a good bite here and a good bite there, and going hither and thither and over. And wherever she went, this person who guarded her must go after her, but he must never go before her, nor hold her, nor stand in her way, but follow her always. And this cow, paraphrasing again, used to work 60 miles a day, 30 miles out, 30 miles back. Anyway, these three brothers, the first brother guards her, does a good job, gets a sword. The second brother guards her, gets a sword. And now the youngest brother says, like, I'm as good man as ye. And then he went to guard her, but he slipped his foot. And when he looked away and then looked back, the cow was gone. Now, said the smith, he'll give you a year and a day to find this cow, Glasglevin. So the three brothers set out in their ship and sailed over the sea till they came to a strand. And a strand is like a part of the beach. And there was a man on a strand who was building a fence to keep out the sea. Well, says the youngest of the brothers Cain, that's a foolish work you're at. It's not a bit more foolish than what you're at, says the man. I am under a spell by the man that took the cow, which is, of course, Balor, who we've already talked about, of the evil eye. And he has one eye in the middle of his forehead. If you want to get the cow, says this mysterious man on a beach. I don't know if this is the best person to ask for advice about a missing cow, but here we are. If you want to get the cow, you must eat 7 years butter with 3 sorrel leaves and 7 years meat. Seems quite a lot of butter to eat with a sorrel leaf, and quite a lot of meat of 7 years. So Cain, the youngest brother, is kind of like, that seems like quite a lot, but okay. And then this mysterious stranger on the beach says, also you must lie with 300 dark-haired women and 300 red-haired women and 300 fair-haired women and have children by them in 9 months' time. That's quite a lot of things to be doing in 9 months and have babies. And Cain kind of reacts. It's like, well, that's a terrible number of children, says Cain. Well, says the man who was building the fence, those 900 women are the guardians of Balor, and Balor's daughter up there on the hill, and he doesn't let anyone visit her. But if you can at all, you must go for her. No one will ever kill Balor, this evil guy with this one eye, except the son of his daughter. And 'tis only by Balor's death that I will ever be free. So I don't know, this like mysterious man building a fence to keep out the seas, kind of like striking a bit of a deal. So Cain has a wee think, and he's like, okay, very well, I'll go to Balor's daughter if I can, but never mind these other women, says he. The man on the beach looks a bit startled. You will go first to Balor's daughter, says the man. She will be pleased with you and like you, but you must treat all these other women the same way, or they'll tell Balor that they saw you there. Cain kind of pauses for a second, and then the man on the beach continues, don't worry though, I'll give you a belt to wear and you'll be as good after the last woman as after the first. And then you must bring all these children to me. Right, there's a lot going on in this story, but I kind of just want to highlight the sex belt issue here. This guy on the beach is giving somebody a magic belt that's going to help him have sex with 900 women. And it might seem a little bit misogynistic when we're thinking about this story, but the idea behind it is, when Cain's got the belt, it means that he doesn't have to be physically able to do it because the belt takes all that away. What he needs to be able to do is kind of woo 900 women and become a man. So it's kind of like a coded story in this. So please don't have it like take away the fact that there's a lot of sex happening. But hey, there's no sex shaming here. So anyway, long story short, he does have sex with all the women and he gives them babies, and then he finally gets to meet Ethne and has a child with her, and it's a son. So he brings all of the children back to the man on the strand, and he's still there making his fence. It's been 9 months, I guess it's not going very well for him. So the man on the beach says, like, I want you to take Ethne's son home with you. And when you go out with the children into the deep sea, throw the whole lot of them out, but keep the daughter's son. His name will be Lugh, the long arm, and he will kill his grandfather, Balor, of the evil eye. So Cain takes 900 children in his cloak and then drops them all in the sea. And then, to his surprise, these young babies turn into a school of seals. And this is how the seals came to be. This is from David Thompson's book, and I have to apologize for my bad telling of that story. I'm not a storyteller, but you kind of get the kind of general gist of things. That Lugh and the Archangel Michael and Manon MacLear are all kind of wrapped up with the idea of the sea and the coast and things that happen around it. And I don't know if you've ever seen a seal up close, but if you look in their eyes, they're the most human eyes you'll ever see. And also, seals are meant to cry. No animal really cries. And they're also meant to kiss each other. And maybe this is where like the idea of selkies come from, the idea of these shape-shifting people in the sea. But we'll not dwell on that. But just it links in very nicely to the idea of what we're talking about, these kind of like three figures on the shore at the time of Michaelmas. So what is Michaelmas? It's a festival, it's a saint's day, and it's primarily wrapped around the idea of gathering carrots, baking bread, racing horses on the beach, and having a dance. And I'm going to go into some of these kind of customs in a little bit, if I have enough time after telling that story. Two of the things that are really, really interesting about this day is around this time, there's the plants called Michaelmas daisies. They're an aster, and they're purple. And it kind of usually signifies that the autumn equinox is here. But it's also known as Devil's Spit Day. That could happen on the 29th of September or on the 10th of October. And Devil's Spit Day is about blackberries. So on this day, back to St. Michael threw Lucifer out of heaven and he landed on a pile of blackberries and they hurt him, and so he spat on them. In other stories, he pees on them. And you're not meant to eat them anymore after the devil has weed on your blackberries. But why it's kind of important is that it links to the idea of harvest again. Just a simple kind of tale like that is actually letting us know as people that actually maybe your berries aren't as good after the 10th of October as they might be. And if you look at them, if you go blackberry picking at all, if you look at them, you can start to see little maggots and stuff that grow in them about this time of year. So it's not the best. There's also another story relating to horses around the puka or ampuka. Puka is just another word that translates to spirit or ghost, and it's been made quite famous in traditional witchcraft circles. But in Scotland, this kind of spirit is famously like a big black horse with big glowing gold eyes. And it's usually like a wild black colt. They sometimes have heavy chains around its neck, and what the puka used to do is, if you rode it, unlike the kelpie, which is another water spirit that we have in Scotland, the puka would like ride you ragged, and then it would throw you in a peat bog or a river or a stream, and then quite nicely, actually, it would bring you back home to where you began. So it wouldn't kill you, it would just, I don't know, do you over a little bit. So this links again with the story of Devil's Spit Day, because in Scotland and in Ireland, the puka was the one that spat on the blackberries and not Lucifer or Satan or the deal, or however you want to kind of like talk about it. And there's lots of amazing stories that I will share with you another day around the puka and how it was helpful in terms of milling and all of this kind of stuff. But if we dwell on that, we will run out of time, I'm sure. This is a really nice quote from Tobon and Dukas, which is the Well of Knowledge. If you speak Gaelic, I would recommend you going to check it out. This kind of links the idea of the struan and the bread with St. Michael again, and the kind of idea of the fragmentation of the she across different levels, the story that I told at the beginning, that he gave angels bread to say, like, if you better come back to heaven. So I don't know why I keep giggling at this, but it's just quite funny that angels need bread to return to heaven. And then some of them didn't, because obviously they didn't like the bread. So they, again, these people and the bread just fell into the ocean, the rocks, the earth, the sand, or the sky. And again, this is another story around how like the different spirits that we have, in an animist sense, I would say, in the broadest way, were created by the Archangel Michael, which is again a kind of relevance if you think about Manna MacLear and Lugh and all of the kind of knowledge that sits within the symbolism of all of this kind of stuff. It's really important to kind of think about these connections, I think. So without much further ado, I'm gonna talk about the kind of Michaelmas stuff that used to go on. A warning in advance, I might giggle a little bit. There's quite a lot of carrots, a lot of carrot chat around this festival. And a lot of it, because I've got a bit of a kind of dirty mind, I think, is just the symbolism of it is very interesting if you think about things in a kind of harvest festival way. But also we need to think about it in terms of Linazol. People got hand fasted, which is the idea that people would be married for a year and a day, to see if they kind of got on. So this would be the next time that they maybe got to like hang out away from church. So carrots feature quite a lot, and the word progeny and all of this kind of stuff, but I don't want that to be your only takeaway from what I'm talking about, because there's lots of other symbolism in it. So the women, and I apologize about how gendered all of this is, but going back to the people who gathered the folklore, we have an absolute dearth of folklore around people with disabilities, people who were LGBTQIA, all of this kind of stuff, because it was kind of brushed under the carpet really by the people that were pursuing the folklore that we have. I would urge anyone who is listening with an interest in this, there's a huge gap in the research around these kind of areas that you might want to pick up on and explore. But yeah, so I apologize for its kind of genderedness and gendered roles that existed at the time. So the women would pop out on a day called Carrot Sunday, and they would go looking for wild carrots, which you can see in the background of the slide, with their mattock, which you can see in the middle of the slide. It's like a three-pronged fork. And what they used to do is they used to dig an equal-sided triangle called a token, which is something you can probably translate roughly as like sod or cleft. And it's kind of similar to the ones that we do in the riding of the marches, but that's a whole different story. So they would get their mattock and they would dig this three-sided triangle with a thing with three prongs. some researchers talk about the fact that the triangle looks a bit like the shield of Michael, which is a triangle, and the mattock kind of looks a little bit like a trident. The number 3 is very significant in Scottish folklore, and probably has lots and lots of other symbolism beyond the Trinity and what we're talking about here. So what they used to do is they would dig this hole with this mattock, and then they would sing. I'm not going to sing the song. My Gaelic is really bad, so I'm only going to be talking the English, I guess. They used to sing a ran or a rune and intone it, and the words were cleft, fruitful, 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 joy of carrots upon me, Michael the brave endowing me, Breach the fair be aiding me, progeny preeminent over every progeny, progeny preeminent over every progeny, progeny of my progeny. So there's a lot of progeny chat going on there. If a lady was lucky enough to find a carrot, which was like a forked carrot, her pals would come over and they would be like, oh, you're so lucky, you found a forked carrot. And then it would be forked, joyful, 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 joy of carrots, etc., etc., etc. This is all to do with the festival and kind of will become apparent later. I'm just looking at the time. There was lots of rivalry about who had the best carrots, and they would carry them in a bag on the waist and a girdle. And if they were wearing traditional dress, it would be in the folds of their clothes that they would carry them. They would carry them then in kind of tied up bunches. Each of them kind of would have a glach, which is like a handful of carrot. They would be tied with 3-plied thread, and it would be generally scarlet. And for people that know about Scottish folklore, the colour scarlet and the colour red are really, really important things to have. Just checking the time. Right. So yeah, so they would carry them to the festival, which is the Michaelmas festival. Also, men used to kind of try and steal the carrots. But the idea is these carrots are really special because on the next day when they went horse riding, these would be things that the women would present to their riding companion on their horse races and the procession that would happen. Yeah, when a woman gave the man the carrots at the cavalcade or the horse racing, he would say, thank you, but he would also say, progeny and peace on the hands that gave, issue and peace on my love who gave, progeny and plenty without scarcity in thy dwelling, wifehood and motherhood on my brown maid, endowment and prosperity to my love who gave. So there's a lot to do with carrots and the symbology of carrots. But we have to bear in mind that this is a harvest festival, and wild carrots grow primarily, from my experience, really near the beach too. So they have a bit of a kind of relationship with the sea. I'm sure wild carrots grow other places than the places that I've seen them, but primarily I've found them growing wild in the sea. Wild carrots also, the seed of wild carrots, the Cotus carota, I think, is its Latin name, could be used as a drug to stop you conceiving babies as well. So we have this kind of really interesting dualism in the carrot symbology, and it might seem a little bit weird and it might seem a little bit strange to us, but it's a harvest festival, and this is them celebrating harvest, but also each other in companionship and hanging out with your pals. Digging carrots actually sounds like quite a good fun, and singing songs to each other about how great your carrots are, you know, and getting a bit jealous. It's like community competition. And the whole festival really is overlaid with this idea of competition. So the horses, I'm finally at the horse chat. I'm doing a little bit of reading out loud, so apologies if this kind of sounds a little bit rough, but Martin was a famous folklorist, and he describes the races on Harris, which were done on the beach. And excuse the kind of like flowery oldie language, but this is how it was written. And I kind of, why I want to read it out is to make sure that you're hearing it as it was written and not my kind of shortened and compressed version of it. So the natives are much addicted to riding, said Martin Martin, the plainness of the country disposing both men and horses to it. They observe an anniversary cavalcade on Michaelmas Day, and then all ranks of both sexes appear on horseback. The place of this rendezvous is a large piece of firm sandy ground on the seashore, and they have horse racing for small prizes, for which they contend eagerly. There is an ancient custom by which it is lawful for any of the inhabitants to steal his neighbour's horse the night before the race and ride him all the next day, provided he deliver him safe and sound to the owner after the race. The manner of running is by a few young men who use neither saddles nor bridles except two small ropes made of bent rope instead of the bridle, nor any sort of spurs but their bare heels. And when they begin the race, they throw these ropes on the horses' necks and drive them on vigorously with a piece of long seaware in each hand instead of a whip. And this is dried in the sun several months before for that purpose. This is a happy opportunity for the vulgar, says Martin Martin, who have few occasions for meeting except on Sundays. The men have their sweethearts behind them on horseback and give and receive mutual presents. The men present the women with knives and purses. The women present the men with a pair of fine garters of diverse colours, and they give them likewise a quantity of wild carrots, and the carrots again. Others go on to talk about this in Canna and Skye and Southeast. Alexander Carmichael talks about this in volume 1 of the Carmina Gadelica, which, if you're familiar with it, it talks to Scottish folk magic primarily, and a lot of the style of Scottish folk magic is in a set of instructions that people follow. So if you want to check it out, because we're running out of time and there's still some other stuff to cover, you can look in volume 1 of the Carmina Gadelica, and it clearly explains it bit by bit, kind of this song or ran that people would sing before they raced. Just to kind of be aware as well that people would, at this time and at Linassil, they would take their horses into the sea to kind of seine them, which is like another word for bless, or shaun in Gaelic, yeah. And this is found very similar to the customs at Linassil, where they would take the horses into the sea to kind of bless or seine them. And we know this existed because there was laws against people doing it. So some of those kind of activities were taken to Michaelmas, and they were done there where there was less prohibition for it. Also, after this date of Michaelmas, horse law takes a kind of darker turn. And if you're familiar with much lore of Scotland, you'll be aware of winter time and the wild hunt and the slough and all of this kind of stuff happening. So moving on very, very quickly. So the process of Michaelmas was women gathered carrots on Sunday, while the men were kind of like watching their horses to make sure no one stole them, because everybody wanted to win the race the next day. The women, again, this kind of gendered role, would make what's called like a strone, which is like a bannock. If you're familiar with bannocks, if you're from the Scottish borders and Dumfries to Galloway, you'll kind of know what bannocks are. It's kind of like there's bannocks everywhere. This was actually a really kind of like solemn event. And I have lots of information to tell you about that and not so much time, but I'll see how we go. So in the Carmina Gadelica again, there was a cake called a Strawn Michael. So it's Michael's cake, if you like. And is made of all the cereals grown on the farm during the year. It represents the fruits of the field, as the lamb, which is the sacrificial lamb that they ate with it, represents the fruits of the flocks. It was made of oats, barley and rye, and the only cereals grown in the Isles and around Scotland. These are then fanned on the floor, ground in a quern, which is like a stone bowl with a round stone that they would grind it in, always sunwise. And it would contain a peck of meal and should be baked on a lambskin. So here we have the kind of lamb connotations again. The meal is moistened with sheep's milk, and the sheep being deemed the most sacred animal on this day. For this purpose, the ewes are retained in milk till St. Michael's Eve, after which they're allowed to remain on the hill and to run dry. So basically, there's a kind of link between these lambs, this milk, and this kind of bread. The strewn is baked by the eldest daughter of the family, guided by a mother and assisted by her sisters. As she moistens the meal with the milk, she says, progeny and prosperity of family, mystery of Michael, protection of Trinity. Then the guys would go and get what's called like a strewn flag, which is like a big stone, and then they would drag it from the moorland during the day, and it's set before the fire. And then the strewn, this cake, if you like, is set against it. The fire, according to Carmichael, should be made of what's called like sacred faggots of the oak, the rowan, the bramble, and other trees, like woods that are crossed woods, which is like woods that are bad luck, such as the blackthorn, wild fig, aspen, and others should be avoided because it would bring bad luck to the cooking of this cake. As this strewn kind of gains consistency, they would put layers of batter and cream and eggs and butter, and they would kind of coat it with it, so it's like a big ball, if you like. And they would make loads of them. They wouldn't just make one, they would make one for the family, they would make one for the community, and then they would make individual ones for the members of the family, for their like moms, daughters, brothers, and trusted servants. These were known as little strews or children's strews. And then they would also make them, which I think is really, really beautiful, they would make them for people who were dead or absent. And they would make one in their name. And then they would kind of give it to special friends, or if people were experiencing poverty and they didn't have any strews of their own, they would share them with them. And I think this is a really beautiful aspect of Scottish folk customs that we kind of don't have as much anymore. This idea of hospitality and sharing with other people is really important. When they made the strews, they would say a little rhyme, and it would be progeny and prosperity to whoever it was made for. So progeny and prosperity to Scott, mystery of Michael, shielding of the Lord. And it goes on. You can read more and more about this on my website, so I'm not going to go into it. And then there would be like a meal before the horse race. There would be a very early morning mass, and then they would come back, and then they would eat. They would cut the lamb up, put it in the middle of this strewn, and then they would all kind of stand around the table, and they would say this little rhyme, and then they would kind of eat, and it was to bring kind of prosperity and progeny to all of themselves. Oh gosh, running out of time. So when we have Michaelmas, so we have the carrot gathering, we have the strewn making, we have the watching out for the horses being stolen. We then have the horse races on the beach and people gifting people with carrots and prizes. And it's important to think about the people who are riding those horses had such great skill to ride them without saddles and bridles and all of these things, that it's like a competition of talent, and that very much reflects on like Lugh and horses and the people who could ride horses and skilled, because Lugh was the many skilled person and excelled in these things. So yeah, it all kind of ties in quite nicely. So once we've all had the carrots and the bread and the racing and all of this kind of awarding the champions, they would go dancing and have fun and get drunk. Again, carrots turn up. The women, again, would put carrots in the bag, marked for a particular recipient this time, such as a riding companion, which is probably the person that they kind of hooked up with around the nassel. And then they would kind of be like, say a little rhyme as they enter the dance hall, and it would be, "It is I myself that have the carrots. Whoever he be that would win them from me, it is I myself that have the treasure. Whoso the hero could take them from me." And then they would exchange more carrots. I told you there was a lot of carrots in this story. More carrots with the people that they were hanging out with. There's one particular interesting dance, and we don't really have time to kind of go through it in the space allocated today, but it's called the Kayak of the Mill Dust. And if you're familiar with the idea of mummers plays, you'll kind of grasp the idea of there's two people who do this dance called Carlin or Kayak of the Mill Dust, and it's a character dance, and it's danced by a man and a woman the man has a wand and the woman doesn't have a wand, and it's called like a magic wand or a druid's wand, and they kind of dance around each other until the woman falls on the floor dead. Not literally dead, just pretends to be dead. And then he touches her in various places and breathes on her hands and breathes on her forehead and then finally breathes on her mouth, and then she comes back to life. And then they carry on dancing. And this could be done as like a kind of like a mouth tune, a portabile song, or with a piper or a fiddler. It's really interesting because in March we have like the Kayak's day, like Lugh and the Kayak, which is around the spring equinox. So there's a nice kind of weird coincidence maybe, or a balance around this kind of bringing back to life the character of the Kayak. And interestingly enough, she exists in all of the quarter day festivals in some way or form. She just doesn't have a day. The Kayak, I mean by that, she's represented in different ways at all of the different quarter day festivals. So she's a really important figure to Scotland. And some people think that the Kayak and the Bodach, which means grandmother or grandfather, and kind of have a relationship. And is it like an ancestral thing, or is it something more than that? Interestingly, Manon MacLear is also known as the Bodach, or the guy in the grey coat. So there's kind of lots of kind of coincidences there, I guess. So you've just listened to me for 50 minutes, and I really appreciate that. So thank you very much. And you might be wondering, like, why has Scott just sat here and told us lots of different things in a very fast manner about a holiday that doesn't really exist anymore? Well, for me, it's really important because we know as it was. We know what the festival meant to people. We know as it is today, it's kind of like all but forgotten, except in some churches. And I would like, I don't know, if there's one takeaway from what I've been talking about today, is that you can kind of reclaim this community festival in your own way. Like there's lots of things that you could do, like you could make a strewn, you could dance, you could visit a beach, you could have bike competitions, gosh, lots of things. And it helps us reconnect not just with Scottish history and Scottish folklore and that kind of area of thought, but also helps us connect with one another, our communities. It also helps us connect with the environment that we're in and the people that are in that environment. So to me, it's really important that we don't lose sight of these kind of like older traditions, but we bring them forward. If they sit too much in the past, they kind of become stagnant, and it's something that you talk about at events like this. But I would love to see people kind of reclaiming it a little bit, and bringing it into what it means as a kind of modern occurrence of it, really, and making it your own, but with an eye to the past and the traditions that kind of sit there. I'm almost done, you'll be pleased to know. I have asked Kathleen if this is okay, because there's nothing worse when you're listening to somebody talk at an event and then they kind of like totally drop in that they have their own event happening. But if you're interested in this kind of lore and the idea of bringing it forward and preserving it, but also kind of making it your own, we have an event being held on the 23rd and the 24th of January at the Scottish Storytelling Centre. It might actually more than likely be happening online, but if you want to know more about it, you can go to the link at the bottom about taishigtocollective.com/winterslast 2021. Whew. Okay, that was a whistle stop tour, and I apologise. Kathleen, are you there?
I am here.
Hi.
Hello. Well, Scott, I mean, I have to say that was absolutely wonderful. I hope, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you okay, yeah. I do have a wee song to share with you all if we have
Please do, because we're all longing to hear the song. I mean, it would be the perfect way to close your presentation. I think it'd be wonderful, so please go for it.
Okay, cool. And then hopefully we'll have a bit of time to answer people's questions, if that's okay.
Of course.
I'm going to share my screen again. Or am I not? Hang on 2 seconds. What I might do is share my audio with you if I can. And it might come out really loud, and I apologize for that. No, I can't do that. Okay, I'm going to share my screen, and then I'm just going to press play on it. And then hopefully you'll be able to hear it. This is taken from an album that I produced. Did I produce it? No, I did the research for it. I didn't produce it. That's a lie. And it was two wonderful people, Amanda Edmiston, a storyteller, and Debbie Armour from Bird Ellen, took the research, like the whistle stop tour research that I've just been through very quickly, and created a spoken word album with songs. So this is the Great Selkie of School Skree by the wonderful Debbie Armour. Hopefully you'll be able to hear it if I turn up my sound.
Unearthly notice at sun sang, and she sings ballily way. Little can I my bare knees feather, far lives the land that he bides in. Then in a rose at her bed foot, and a grumly guest, I'm sure was he. Here am I, thy bare knees feather, although that I be not comely. I am a man upon the land. I am a selkie in the sea. And when I'm far free land, my dwelling is in Sulskeri. It was na weel quo the maiden fair. It was na weel indeed quo she, that the great Selkie of Sulskeri should he come and doff the bairn to me. Now he has ta'en a purse so good, and he has patted upon her knee, saying, "Gie to me, my little young son, and take thee up thy notice fee. And it shall come to pass on a summer's day, when the sun shines het on Everesting, that I will take my little young son and teach him for to swim the fair. And you shall marry a proud gunner, and a proud gunner I'm sure he
I hope everyone could hear that. Okay. I think that's a beautiful song. It's about a relationship with a handsome, sulky guy and a woman, and what's going to happen with her child later. So thank you, David. Debbie has a rare voice, and I do recommend, sorry, I feel like I'm dropping the merch chat now, but Debbie's got a new album coming out in November. Check out Bird, and you can hear their entire back catalogue on Spotify if you have a Spotify account. So I do recommend checking her out. She's got a beautiful voice, but she takes traditional Scottish songs and maybe makes them a little bit less man does horrible thing to women and all of that kind of like bleak romance that's in that kind of some of the digital stuff, and shifts it around a little bit, but still keeping that kind of traditional vibe to it. So I noticed there's some questions. I hope there are questions I can answer.
Yes, there are some questions have come up with some great comments as well, Scott. I mean, a lovely comment from Caden here. Thank you so much for this brilliant presentation. As someone who did my BA and Masters in Celtic Studies and Scottish Folklore respectively, I was missing having this in my life in Canada. I feel much better now and I'm super grateful. Thank you. And I just wanted to bring that in because I thought, it really highlights the importance of events like this where people can come together from different areas.
That's super lovely. Thank you, Caden. I'm going to expect your cliff notes of where I kind of went a bit wrong. So feel free to email me.
It's been fabulous. Brenda's asked, I think in relation to St Michaelmas, how long ago was it widely celebrated and why did it decline, she's asking.
Oh gosh, that's a big question. That's probably a whole nother presentation in itself, really. But think about the Highland clearances, think about the Lowland clearances, think about cultures moving to cities, all of that kind of stuff. It's still kicking around, like, kicking around in 1945 was the time that Donald Thompson recorded the Selkie story about Lugh. So it was kind of the very Christian people talking about sex belts. So there's that kind of dynamic. But gosh, where does it date back to? I couldn't tell you without lying. I'm pulling a date out my head. But around about, 1000s, 80, I don't know, when we started to kind of get an influx of religious ideology, Michaelmas would have started, and then as we kind of got the Highland clearances and cultures started to kind of move to cities, then you would have seen it kind of being a little bit removed from the cultures that would have practiced it. But email me and I'll send you a timeline. How does that sound? I've just pulled like an Albert Einstein when someone's like asked him, do you know what the speed of light is? And he was like, no, that's what books are for. So if you want to send me an email, I'll happily fire out the information that I can find to you for that, if it's something that you're super passionate about. But I'd be lying if I covered it out the top of my head. But I hope that kind of answers the question as well as I can.
That was brilliant, Scott. Thank you. Is there anyone else who's got a question tonight that would like to pop that in the Q&A? This is your opportunity, folks. There's the silence.
No, it's cool. I really don't mind. I'm going to share a very brief slide if people don't have questions. There's another one popped up here.
I have got one. Do you have any recommendations for further reading? And I think that's that's also a talk in itself, isn't it, Scott?
It is. I'm going to just show you a list of references that I prepared earlier. 2 seconds. Because I know that Kathleen has got other things that she needs to be doing. If you like, I can parcel all this up to yourself, Kathleen, with the notes that I didn't manage to make it through. With a video, if you like, as a PDF, if people want to have a kind of deep dive into it. How does that?
That would be superb. Thank you very much for that, because I'm sure that there'll be people out there who would get a lot of value from that. So thank you.
So we're being invaded by my cat now. So Are there any other questions before I let you head?
Well, we've kind of been asked about that. You mentioned Manannan as the Bodach. Where can I find that information? I don't know if I've pronounced those things right, and apologies if I've got them wrong.
Yeah. I have notes. Hang on 2 seconds. I have things pinned all over my office, which is now underneath my cat. Is it here? It goes with the name. I'll tell you what to do, because I don't have them to hand. If you Google the churl with the grey coat, or if you look at the stories of the Old Grey Magician, there's a really good book called The Old Grey Magician, which is full of traveller stories about the churl with the grey coat. And there's lots and lots and lots of kind of correlations between the Bodach and the churl with the grey coat. I can't remember how to pronounce the Gaelic, so you'll have to forgive me. And the Old Grey Magician, and there's lots of discussions around those ideas relating to Odin and Norse mythology as well. Like it just keeps unfolding and unfolding and unfolding. Oh my gosh, can you hear my cat purring in the microphone? I apologize. It's also now doing something you probably don't want to hear. I saw that someone raised their hand. I can't. Apologies if you could. If you have a question, that would be great. But what is
I'm just having a wee look. I think we've probably got most now. People just sort of getting, sharing some feedback here. I have read, Erica says, I have read quite a lot on this subject, and I wondered if you have noticed the similarities and differences in these folk stories between Scotland, Orkney, Shetland, Norse, and the Isle of Man.
Oh, right. It's a complete kind of, for me, the beauty in it is that they're all very similar, but a little bit different, just depending on where people are. There's also similar stories in Russia, Spain, like what is it that they say? Jess Smith said it to me. If you know Jess Smith, she's a wonderful lady. She said like a good story travels further than you'd ever imagine. I'm probably misquoting her, but a good story travels. These kind of things travel. And that there's very similarities between stuff, but again, it's tweaked for where people live, which I think is something that's really, really beautiful about these things, that the bioregion that people are in, or what they kind of bring with them, or the cultural influences that they have, kind of just change it a little bit, but the fundamentals, I think, are there. Yeah, kind of like a good story, people add arms and legs onto it as it kind of travels around, or they change it to kind of suit themselves. I'm not sure if that answers your question. I'm going off on tangents about something completely unrelated, sorry.
We can share the PDF hopefully to people through their email addresses, if that's okay.
Yeah, 100%. I will pull it together for you to send out, if that's okay. Sorry, this is my cat here. Hi, this is Pyewacket. He's shy. There we go. Zoom cats, it's a whole new meme. Are there any other questions?
I think we've probably got most now. Just a quick one. What is the mill dust for the last dance?
It's the Carlin of the Mill Dust. It's actually the name of the dance itself, or the Kayak of the Mill Dust. So it's the name of the dance, but it's very reminiscent of a harvest dance, because it's the old lady of the mill dust, like the stuff that's left on the floor. Around Linnassel time as well, the kayak is the last sheaf that's cut from a field and kept in people's houses. So there's that kind of tie-in with harvest time, and this character, the kayak grandmother, or however you want to kind of view her, as this representation of kind of like the harvest. So it's almost like, I don't know, in my mind, it's almost like a kind of ritualized dance where the kayak is dead, but then she comes back, because that's the nature of life and winter, really. And this is when she kind of is her wholeness comes into being, the idea of the kayak. But it's interesting because in March, the Kayak has a staff which she blights crops with. And in this dance, it's the guy holding it, bringing it back to life. So who knows what that means? Dig into it, find out. I think you can still find the dance moves and the song music to the Mill Dust dance as well. So it's out there.
Fantastic. Well, folks, I mean, this has been an incredible night, and I think it began wonderfully with that really warm welcome, and it really struck a chord for me, imagining my hands around a warm cup of tea or coffee or whatever, you know, and just imagining everyone else doing that. I thought that really brought everyone together beautifully. We've had some fantastic imagery. We've thought about carrots quite a lot. Been brilliant, I have to say. And when I saw that beautiful strewn, I was feeling quite hungry, I have to say, Scott, because it looked absolutely brilliant. And I think the importance coming across from yourself is about keeping these traditions alive and perhaps adapting them, you know, to the here and now, and doing what we can to put our own slant on them, but to have that togetherness. And in a year that has been characterised by spending time apart from the people who we love, our friends, our families, coming together through whatever means is more important than it's ever been before. And the music at the end was just very beautiful, very poignant and moving. Thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm sure all the guests did tonight as well. And we want to thank you so much for giving your time tonight.
No, thank you for having me. Sorry for moving at such a pace, but there was a lot to kind of get through. You'll see in the notes how much was not talked about as well. And you can kind of read it through. Oh, do you know, if I'm feeling generous, I might turn it into a little booklet kind of thing that you can print out with the pictures in it. We'll see how busy I get with my day job. But thank you all for having me. It's been brilliant. And all the best for it's the finale of the Festival of Folklore tonight, isn't it? Is this you kind of winding up like the whole weekend?
It is, yes. A couple of events to go, and it's just flown by after all these months of planning, but it's been great. It's been such an eclectic mix of people, lots of folk coming together, sharing their passions and interests and different ideas and theories, beliefs and viewpoints. It's been great. And there's some, I'm sure you'll see all these comments later, Scott, some wonderful comments for people thanking you for tonight. So do save that chat and bask in the glory you so richly deserve. And Pie Wacket, of course, special mention.
He's a little famous. He's on the album as well, Tales of the Taishi. He's the voice of the devil, and that purr that you can hear, that's on the album, but it's turned into a growl, so there we go. But no, thank you for having me, and I hope you all have a beautiful Sunday evening. The sun has set and the moon has risen over the hill just outside my house, so it's that liminal twilight time. Hi. Right.
Perfect way to end it, Scott. Thank you so much. This has been incredible. And good night to Pie Wacket as well.
Good night, all. Okay, cheers.